Okay, so my name is Antoine. I've been working for a long time with Jack Park and more recently with Sonny Batia on knowledge federation. Knowledge federation, why? Because we want to have augmented collective intelligence. Now, when we speak about augmentation, we're thinking about Engelbart's work. And I especially want to have us think about this ABC model. You know, there's the work we're doing, we want to improve that work continuously, there's a learning loop there, but we want to improve the improvement, and that's the meta-learning loop. And since his days, you know, there's been progress with individual software to do the work, there's personal productivity measurement, but at the individual level, we can't improve the improvement so much. So let's think collectively, collective software, group process analysis, think of, for example, the Scrum postmortem. But when we're improving the improvement, it's still very much, it's not done that much. There's been, for example, action science, which was quite fascinating in that direction, but it's very much a niche. And I will claim to do that, to improve the improvement, we need to think together about our processes. And that's really the realm of collective intelligence. Now, there are some people researching collective intelligence, actually quite a few, but so much of the attention, the eye is on AI, not on collective intelligence. So is there a relation there? Well, of course, AI is in some way a form of collective intelligence. It's this condensation of a training set. We can converse with it. It can synthesize what people are saying, so that's useful for collective intelligence as a tool. But there's severe limitations. It skews to the average position. It's not that good at expressing outliers because they didn't get into the memory, the collective memory. It's mostly used in processes with individuals, though Sonny has done some brilliant work of involving it in the polis system. And if we're thinking about collective intelligence, it's about humans taking decisions together. And that, for me, means explainable governance, open governance. And you don't want to have a black box generative AI or otherwise taking decisions. So, and you can ask the AI, why did you take that decision? It will come up with rationalization, much like humans do. But you cannot, it's a confabulation, it's not trustable, and indeed it can be gamed. And there's people introducing bias deliberately in AI. So I don't think we should give decisions to black box, though we can use AI to help us define a white box for taking decisions, and that's absolutely fine. But transparency is key. But again, transparency of what? Of this white box of decision-making process. So that means if we want to learn about learning, again, the recursivity, the meta loop, we need the LLM to access memory. The LLM itself has this very small window of memory. We can make it bigger by retraining. And people use RAG so that it accesses to selective memory, usually in the form of documents. Now, what are the units of knowledge that we humans or LLMs should work with? Of course, we can work with documents. A lot of machine learning uses data structures instead, tables, data tables, or other objects. And I would argue neither of these is really knowledge. Language is very fuzzy, and it's hard to find plain boundaries in a document. Whereas on the other hand, data schemas can be a bit rigid, and there's also a lot of steep learning curve to learn to express what we want to express in certain data schemas. So where is knowledge in there? And there's a lot of attempts to define knowledge as data structures. You probably know about knowledge graphs, and some RAGs access knowledge graphs. And of course, there's been RDF, there's been all these work on the ontologies. There's a lot of work to define knowledge. That's going to bring us back to a very, very old construct, which is the notion of frames. Now, frames, what are frames? It's a bit of a vague term. It's used originally it was for linguistic action frames. John gives a ball to Mary. There's already 3 actors in there. It's a giving frame. Now, that was used by Minsky for knowledge representation. Lakoff and Jacobson did wonderful work on metaphors as frames. Walton on argumentations frames, beautiful work, where he goes into the weakness of each frame. Each frame is a heuristic, fascinating work. George Kelby worked on personal constructs and personal hypotheses, and in a way frames epistemic frames, if you will. Erwin Goffman has been working on dramaturgic frames, and Lakoff again has extended that work. And what I want to say is frames exist at many levels. One thing I didn't write, pattern languages. The patterns are frames very much. You may be familiar with that. And because frames exist at many levels, I think it's important to be able to nest frames within one another. And this allows something very important. If we're going to talk about knowledge and do again recursive learning, you need to talk about the link. You cannot do that in RDF. You cannot do that with a graph, a classic knowledge graph. You cannot link to the link. And I've worked a lot with recursive hypergraphs, and they're a bit unwieldy, but you can actually do that with nested frames. If John gives a ball to Mary, there's in there hidden, well, John had the ball, and Mary now has the ball, and those are triples in a way, and John met Mary. And you can take that frame of giving and find the sub-triples, refine, and embed it in, oh, and by the way, Mary paid for the ball, so that's another given frame. It's embedded in a bigger frame, which is the transaction frame, and you can have provenance. We know this because we have access to John's ledger, and Mary bought the ball because she wanted to go to the beach, and reasons and context, and you can do all of this with frame nesting, and I think that's a very important construct. So that's one way in which I differ with traditional Minskian frames. And the other thing is I see frames not as the ultimate structure, but as a bridge between informal and formal knowledge. So we're here to talk about text, right? And I think the elements of frames should not be necessarily literals or data structures or other frames, but there is this many-to-many relationship between text in stories. Storytelling is still our primary mode of communication, and a story can be interpreted as many different frames. A frame can be found in many stories. And once you have made those identifications, then you can say, oh, this is this data structure, this is that data structure, this is that data structure. And you can bridge the formal, rigorous data with the more open language. And I think this is why I propose frames as a way to approach things. It's, as a language, it's easy to approach, it's flexible, it should be easy to create new frames using known subframes as a substrate. And as data, it's more rigorous, it's comparable, it's composable. And those are essential qualities if you want to do aggregation for large-scale collective intelligence. That's my frames. Once you have frames, how do you use them? Well, of course, you start from the stories, as I said, and you try to say, okay, what schema would fit this? And here, again, AI can be useful to test, oh, does this frame really express what's in your data? Or maybe another frame would do better, so you can compare. And once you have a set of frames, you can start saying, okay, well, here's my informal case, and progressively formalize it. Well, this is text, but I think this is actually this entity. And again, there's space for
someone's
AI
on the chat. Can you tell them 5 minutes? Thanks.
You have five minutes, including dialogue. We're
Okay,
getting there.
Okay, so you can have, and you can also, once you have the formal case, the LLM can work on that. And another thing, of course, you can iterate in the schema library. And what this means, again, is the LLM can find, oh, this new story doesn't fit, so you need new or updated story. And for dissemination, you can use the frame, you can use the LLM as a tutor to help people, and there's a big pedagogical function. You want to help people understand the frame that they may not be familiar with. And that is especially useful if you have a multidisciplinary team where you can start using the LLM to bridge between this frame used in this knowledge community and that other frame, and you want to have a lens between the frames. And it can also, that way act as a bridge between epistemic communities and identify what's missing from this perspective that is found in that perspective. So really what we're trying to propose here is frames as a collective research program. We're into collective intelligence. We should all be experimenting on how people can learn to think about frames in terms of frames. And I think this is, on the one hand, quite natural. It comes from psychology. But if we make them explicit, how will that work? And we'll probably have domain-specific frames, UX, UI. But to do that, we need to have a crowdsourced commons of frame schemas. We need a format for the frames, for the nested frames and for the data lenses. And this should be anchored in your documents and data structures. How does the frame really bridge your stories with your data? And we need to have a shared protocol to exchange that kind of information, maybe do hackathons together. I'm going to announce, I'm still researching this in the open on my HyperKnowledge site. One of the experiments we've started with is SenseGraph, which is right now a team game of creating dialogue argument maps, but we're going to, well, dialogue maps really, but we're going to make it into a frame lab, collective frame lab. And there's a debate graph also. Here are the actual links where we're thinking about these things. So this is where I'm at. This is what we're trying to do. And any questions or comments?
Thank you very much. And Jonathan Pinn has the first question in the chat.
Questions here?
Jonathan Penn, good examples of type of frame, new frames. Right. So I gave a simple linguistic frame as an example. If you go back, I should have kept mine. Let me go back to the slides. If they're still there, I'll have to represent. But I was giving all these examples of. Let's see if I can find it easily. And I know you don't see them yet. Here we are. Shouldn't have stopped sharing. Apologies. Here. If you look at augmentation schemes, so when you say, for example, ad hominem is a frame. If you think of, as I said, all pattern languages, think of course, the architectural patterns of Alexander, think of the design patterns of the group of four. They were a great teaching scheme, but what's really interesting is you can start saying, well, this, or think of the symbolic frames, like Lakoff speaks about how in politics, sorry, I'll introduce politics. A lot of the conservative discourses in terms of the parent that is disciplining the child, whereas the progressives have a nurturing parent frame, in which everything else can be interpreted and explained. But within this, you can look at how does this specific interaction, and that's a linguistic action frame, fit in this explanatory dramaturgic frame. So these are the kinds of things. And why would that person have done that? That's an interpretation. Oh, attributed motivations. I didn't speak about Soa's work on concept graphs. Like, I think that so-and-so thinks that, or Fauconnier on mental stasis. If you were, Fauconnier's example, if you were a better painter, the girl in the painting would have blue eyes. So this hypothetical world, that's a frame also. You're creating this hypothetical world, and why would that make you a better painter? We can ask. So I'm giving all these examples. Now think of elementary frames. Causality is an elementary frame. If we do this, this is the expected impact. This is the likely unexpected or undesired side impact. Those are about intentionality. Intentionality is a frame, but consequence.
We're running a bit over.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you very, very much.